Okay, so what if I told you that saying something that is technically 100% literally true could get you charged with a federal crime? It sounds completely impossible, right? But a recent Supreme Court case dug into this exact puzzle, and it all hinged on the power of a single word. This case forces us to ask a really tricky question. Where does a carefully worded truth cross the line and become a criminal lie? Let's get into it.
So this is the sentence that started the whole thing. It's from a recorded phone call between a man named Patrick Thompson and a loan servicer for the FDIC. He's trying to figure out an invoice, and he's just stating what he remembers borrowing. On the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, but was it?
Because here's the catch. While Mr. Thompson did in fact borrow $110,000 in one loan, that wasn't the whole picture. This number, $219,000, was the total principal he had actually borrowed after taking out 2 more loans. So was his statement true, or was it a lie? And more importantly, under federal law, does that distinction even matter?
All right, to get to the bottom of this, we're going to walk through the story of Thompson's very, very expensive phone call. We'll see how he was actually found guilty, and then we'll tackle the huge question the Supreme Court had to answer. What's the real difference between false and misleading? Then we'll dig into why context is everything, and finally, what we can all take away from this fine, fine line.
So, to really understand how a single sentence could escalate all the way to the Supreme Court, we need to rewind and start at the beginning, with a series of loans.
It all kicked off back in 2011. Thompson borrows an initial $110,000, a number that's going to become super important later. But that was just the start. Over the next few years, he takes out 2 more loans, bringing his total debt up to that $219,000 figure. Then, in 2017, things get complicated. His bank fails and the government, specifically the FDIC, takes over his loans. So when an invoice for almost $270,000 shows up, he does what anyone would do. He picks up the phone to figure out what's going on.
And that phone call, well, it didn't just lead to a clarification. It led to a federal indictment. And this is where the legal fight really begins.
Okay, so this right here is the law at the absolute heart of the case. It makes it a crime to knowingly make any false statement to the FDIC. Now, you got to pay really close attention to that wording, false statement. It doesn't say misleading, it doesn't say deceptive, it specifically says false. That one word, it's everything.
And based on that phone call, a jury actually found him guilty. Thompson's defense was pretty simple. Whoa, wait a minute. I did borrow $110,000. What I said was literally true. But, the lower courts just didn't see it that way.
And here's where things get legally complicated. The court where Thompson was tried, the Seventh Circuit, had this view that a misleading statement was good enough to convict someone under this law. But other federal courts, like the Sixth Circuit, had a much stricter take. They said you can't be convicted for just leaving information out. This disagreement between different courts is called a circuit split, and it's the classic reason the Supreme Court decides to step in and be the final referee.
And that is exactly what happened. The case made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, which agreed to settle this conflict once and for all and answer a very specific, very fundamental question.
This is it. This is the whole ballgame right here. The fundamental question the entire case boils down to. Is a misleading truth legally the same thing as a lie? The answer was going to have huge implications for what any of us can and can't say when we're dealing with the government.
So after hearing all the arguments, all 9 justices of the Supreme Court came to a unanimous decision. A simple, direct, and really powerful no. The court said a statement that's just misleading but is technically true is not a false statement under this particular law. And just like that, Thompson's conviction, which was based on the idea that misleading was enough, was thrown out. So why? How did they get there? The court's logic was actually beautifully straightforward. First, they looked at the text itself. The law uses the word false, which just means untrue. It doesn't say misleading. Second, they looked at the bigger legal context. The court pointed out that in a ton of other laws, Congress explicitly forbids statements that are false or misleading, which is just a brilliant way of showing that if Congress wanted to include misleading here, it knew exactly how to do it. And third, they looked at precedent. Past rulings always focused on whether something was strictly true or false, not how misleading it might have been. So this seems like a clear win for Thompson, right? Say something literally true and you're in the clear. But hold on, not so fast. The court added a crucial twist that shows why you can't just take words in a vacuum.
To explain this twist, Justice Alito used this fantastic analogy. Picture this. A mother sees an empty cookie plate and asks her daughter, "Did you eat all the cookies?" The child, who ate all 12, says, "I ate 3." Now, Is that statement true? I mean, technically, yeah, she did eat 3 cookies on her way to eating all 12. But in the context of that very direct question, her answer is obviously designed to deceive. It's a false answer to the question she was really being asked.
So what do you think? Based on that context, is the child's statement false? Is she telling a lie? Even though her words are, on their own, literally true.
And the Supreme Court's answer? Absolutely. A literally true statement can absolutely become a false one depending on the context. That's why being literally true isn't some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. So while Thompson's conviction got overturned, he wasn't exactly declared innocent. Instead, the case was sent back to the lower court with a new mission: figure out if his statement, within the full context of that phone call, was actually false.
So what does this all mean for the rest of us? I mean, why does this one case about one guy's loans matter so much?
Well, let's boil it down. What are the key lessons here? First, to break this specific law, a statement has to be factually untrue. Just being misleading isn't enough. But, and this is so critical, saying something literally true won't automatically save you. Context can completely transform a technically true phrase into a legally false statement. And really, this whole case is a powerful reminder of just how much the precise words chosen by lawmakers actually matter in the real world.
The Supreme Court has definitely clarified the letter of the law here, but it leaves all of us with this lingering question. In our own lives, where do we draw the line between a misleading truth and an outright lie? The answer, it turns out, isn't always so simple.